Hey, I heard you like violent films, but films in the olden days weren't super violent until this one, which for its time was pretty bloody violent. None of this clutching your chest like you're having a heart attack when you get shot nonsense. This one has quite a bit of blood, suggestive sexuality, and lots of people in cars shouting. It's Bonnie and Clyde. In the 1930s, the real-life Clyde Barrow and Bonnie Parker embarked on a crime spree across several states, robbing banks and killing anyone who tried to stop them. They're believed to have murdered 13 people. But, and this is much more important, they made a cute couple, and thus they became folk heroes. Just in case you think shipping is a relatively new thing. By the mid-60s, Hollywood was changing from an archaic studio system with content controlled by the Hays Code to something a little more dangerous.
Shoot, I knew you never robbed a place, you faker.
Warren Beatty was a rising star and had come across the Bonnie and Clyde project as something that mixed American gangster films with the sensibilities of the French New Wave cinema. He produced the project and approached several directors about helming the picture, but most turned him down. Arthur Penn didn't, and the result is 1967's Bonnie and Clyde. Beatty elected to play Clyde Barrow himself, bringing on Faye Dunaway as Bonnie Parker.
Hey, what's your name anyhow?
Clyde Barrow.
Hi, I'm Bonnie Parker. Pleased to meet you.
Clyde Barrow is a smiling and charismatic criminal, while Bonnie Parker is a waitress and social media influencer, a poet and DTF. She's torn between the gangster lifestyle and wanting a home life with Clyde, without pesky cops trying to arrest them for petty things like, I don't know, armed robbery or multiple homicide. The film is laced with sexual tension, mainly down to Bonnie being a frustrated nymphomaniac, and Clyde often rejecting her advances because of some kind of erectile dysfunction. Because generic Stam Fine branded I can't believe it's not Viagra wasn't then freely available as it is now at all disreputable pharmacies.
If all you want's a stud service, you get on back to West Dallas and you stay there rest of your life.
The movie is highly stylized, and it's a simplified version of the Barrow gang story, concentrating less on the actual crime and action sequences and more on the relationships between Bonnie and Clyde and their accomplices. C.W. Moss, played by Michael J. Pollard, Gene Hackman as Clyde's brother Buck, and Estelle Parsons as Buck's hysterical wife Blanche, who spends most of the film wailing and screaming. That would have been a fun day in the ADR studios. That wailing performance, however, did garner the film's only acting Oscar win for Parsons, despite nominations for Dunaway, Beatty, Pollard, and Hackman. While we're talking Oscars, despite a fair few nominations, the film's only other Oscar win was for Best Cinematography, and the look of the film is lush, sometimes leaning heavily into a vintage feel. The film also makes use of jump cuts to speed up action, and slow motion, which we'll come back to later. It's not always a plot-driven film, and often it's just a series of vignettes that sort of happen in the right order. I mean, it's highly influenced by European films of the time, and we should be thankful that there is actually a beginning, a middle, and an end. And what an ending it is. The sexual tension between Bonnie and her procrastinating lover is never undersold, but the action scenes, basically car chases and shootouts every 15 minutes, are fairly standard for the time, sometimes laced with humour, but then the scene would suddenly be punctuated by graphic violence and blood, quite a bit of blood, which was very new to Hollywood. This is The Longest Day from 1962, a big-budget World War II movie, which showed the slaughter of the Normandy beach landings on D-Day. People just clutch their chests and fall down bloodlessly. In Bonnie and Clyde, we get bullets to the face, bloody wounds, and the famous final scene, where the law finally catches up with Barrow and Parker and riddles them with bullets from submachine guns. Adding to the power of the scene is the use of slow motion, which was briefly to become very popular in more violent films, like the misjudged collaboration between director Sam Peckinpah and Walt Disney Studios in Bambi Bloodbath, now only available for Disney Plus Platinum Ultra subscribers. Bonnie and Clyde holds up fairly well for a 50-plus-year-old film. It's still relatively modern in its approach, and you can see how it influenced so many later filmmakers, such as the makers of Cheech and Chong's Up in Smoke and Frozen 2.
Well, I'm Miss Bonnie Parker, and this here's Mr. Clyde Barrow. We rob banks.
The film manages to tell its story in less than 2 hours without establishing shots that go on for 10 minutes. It doesn't waste your time with pointless busywork. It also has a great early appearance by Gene Wilder as an innocent person caught up with his fiancée in the whirlwind of Bonnie and Clyde's crime spree.
How old are you, honey? I'm 33.
Bonnie and Clyde, folk heroes for decades before this movie and sometime after its release, have faded somewhat as historical figures, and subsequent attempts to tell their story haven't had the same cultural impact as the 1967 film. Warren Beatty didn't do too many tough guy roles after this film, instead concentrating on becoming famous for sleeping with everyone in Hollywood in the 70s and 80s.
I can't get out, but right now you still can. I want you to say the word to me, and I'm gonna put you on that bus back to your mom.
While Faye Dunaway would appear in classics like Chinatown and Network.
You're just like a brother.
Uh-huh.
Ignorant, uneducated hillbilly. Listen, the only special thing about you is your peculiar ideas about lovemaking, which is no lovemaking at all.
Gene Hackman also became a massive star in his own right in films like The French Connection, and became everyone's least favourite co-star.
It was either you or him, wasn't it? What? The guy that you killed, you had to do it, didn't you? It was either you or him.
Warren Beatty and Faye Dunaway, who'd both been nominated for acting awards for their work in this film, but lost, both later won Oscars for other films. The pair returned to the Academy Awards in 2018 to present Moonlight's Best Film Oscar to La La Land. Bonnie and Clyde is a landmark film that, while it doesn't seem anything outlandish to a modern viewer, it's a film that feels way less dated than it should. You only need to compare similar films before and after to see how important a film it is. I hate describing things like movies or songs as important, because that makes me sound pompous and pretentious. Pretentious? Moi? Bonnie and Clyde was criticised on release for glorifying violence, which is the sort of thing people who don't watch films the whole way through would say. Watching Clyde and Bonnie riddled with bullets in slow motion is about as sexy as baseball, and not nude baseball. I've just been informed there is no such thing as nude baseball because the umpires couldn't tell the difference between a strike and a ball. A film that was groundbreaking, influential, well made, and worthy of its reputation, yet still highly entertaining after so long, doesn't come along every day. Bonnie and Clyde is one such film, and highly recommended. It's a classic for a goddamn reason. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, leave a comment below, or check out one of our other videos.